A New York City landlord figured out that it is cheaper to put up cheap scaffolding and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines than it is to do repairs on his building due to government bureaucracy. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's actually, just an update to a long ongoing story that's happening in Manhattan in New York, right? So I've been reading about this for a while and I've been wanting to cover it because it's really a quite interesting issue, right? So we have in New York, there's several buildings owned by a single landlord. I believe it's 10 buildings there, right? And rather, the city has said, hey, you've got to go in there and do this repair to the scaffolding on these buildings, right? And they're older and they're like historic landmarks, right? So the repairs can be extremely expensive on large older buildings that have historic status. So the landlord figured out, hey, it's actually cheaper if I just throw up some cheap scaffolding on there, right? And go get the building permits and then let the city fine me for not doing the work because the work is so expensive. And I imagine that these are rent controlled buildings. So the landlord understands that they won't be able to raise the rent to cover the cost of all these expensive repairs. It's actually kind of funny, but it tells you how bad it is in New York when it comes to the ridiculous bureaucracy for like getting permits and, getting fines and, doing all of this. And yet the landlord has the system kind of figured out to where they aren't able to do anything because, he's compliant. Wow, it's ridiculous, okay? And this is the kind of nonsense we see in New York with all their different rules and laws and, rent control and all that nonsense. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? What do you think of it being cheaper to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines than it is to actually do the repairs, that the city is requiring? That's how bad it is up in New York. Okay, and meanwhile, the tenants in the building, they're actually complaining. They're like, hey, this isn't right. The city needs to jump on it and fix it. But their bureaucracy is so bad that they can't. They basically like, well, he's paying the fines, so they're good enough, right? He's got the scaffolding up like we wanted, good enough. Yeah, it's stupid, right? I'll throw a picture up on the screen showing what the buildings look like, okay? And it's ridiculous, okay? And they say the scaffolding has been up for over 15 years. I mean, this is a ridiculous story. But, when you're a landlord in this sort of place, you know how to work the system. And that's one reason why I say, hey, if you're a newer landlord, I wouldn't look in the New York market. If you already are in the market, you probably understand the dynamics of, the government and, what you have to do in order to make a profit there. So it's probably why those landlords are still profitable even underneath all this bureaucracy. So anyway, let's get into this article. It's coming from pix11.com and it says, Upper West Side scaffolding woes continue. It's depressing. Okay, so they're kind of looking at this from the tenant's perspective, right? And I understand what the tenants are saying, but my question is, right? And I'm pretty sure I already know the answer to this. Is this a rent-controlled building? Okay, and if this is a rent-controlled building, do the tenants seem to understand that the rents that they pay aren't actually enough to cover the increased cost that this landlord is going to face if he has to do all of these repairs? Okay, because the landlord won't be able to raise the rent to cover however much it is to fix this. So let's just get into the article and see what it says. They are the bane of apartment dwellers' existence. We're talking about the scaffolding, netting, and sheds that appear on practically every block where there's a high-rise. They are there to protect pedestrians but make life miserable for tenants. It's depressing, said Leanne Ritchie, a tenant at 51 West 86th Street. It's dark. It's relentless. Another longtime tenant, Roberta Maxwell, has been living with a parade of pigeons nesting on several layers of scaffolding outside her apartment windows for more than 16 years now. As a former pigeon lover, I have turned on a dime, Maxwell said. It's really intimately disgusting to watch them perform intimate acts of whatever it is to sustain their lives. It's constant, it's dirty, it's unhealthy. Well, there's a good hint right there that this is a rent-controlled building, right? The tenant, can't even see out of their window, and look straight into some scaffolding, yet has lived there with that scaffolding there for 16 years. Now, if it's so bad like they claim, well, why are you staying? Well, obviously you have highly subsidized rent, okay? Since 2006, as seen in previous coverage on Pix 11 News, the tenants of 51 West 86th Street have been battling landlord Jacob Weinreb for putting up scaffolding, a pedestrian shed, and netting, but never doing any facade work that would lead to them being taken down. The city fined the landlord hundreds of thousands of dollars for violations at 11 buildings, including the 86th Street one. In February, the city even sued him. We've got the Department of Buildings on it, the Law Department on it, you on it, the tenants on it, me on it, said Gail Brewer, the Upper West Side City Council member. It's been a horrible 16 years. So yeah, landlord literally is paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and getting sued, right? And the landlord isn't really saying much, but, there's so much that can be assumed, okay? If it was cost beneficial for this landlord to do these repairs, the repairs would already be done. There is no reason why the landlord would leave, the scaffolding up for so long. There's no reason why the landlord would refuse to do the repairs unless it was actually cheaper to pay the fines. Okay, and I've heard of this situation happening before where, hey, an inspector comes by and says, hey, you need to fix this, or we're going to fine you like $100, and the landlord's like, well, I'm just going to, write on my taxes that, that's part of my expenses now, the fines that I'm getting, because paying that $100 fine is cheaper than fixing this thing over here that's going to cost me $100,000. Now, in this case, because these are older historic buildings, I imagine that it could cost millions to fix, okay? And if it costs millions of dollars, we're talking about large apartment complexes in Manhattan, right? And if it costs millions of dollars to do the facade repair, then, you have to be able to raise the rent so that you can cover the cost of that repair, right? That's what a normal landlord would do, right? They'd be like, okay, well, I spent $2 million fixing the facade on this building, so I'm going to raise the rents up to cover the cost of that repair, right? Well, in New York, you can't do that, especially with these rent-controlled tenants. So you're stuck. You got this tenant over here living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, paying $600 a month or whatever, right? And you can't raise their rent to cover this $2 million repair. That's a huge loss. Or you could pay $100,000 over the course of 16 years in fines and just write it off. Well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? Okay? They wonder why the landlord is doing this. The landlord has it figured out. Okay? Like I've said many times before, they can pass these laws, they can pass these rules, pass the regulations, right? And so many times landlords will find a way around it that is within the law so that, they can continue to operate their business profitably. Oh man, it boggles my mind that they just don't think like, hey, well, this might not be beneficial for the landlord. Why doesn't he fix this? Oh, they're morons. New York City is a place where you want to open up the light, and I am just appalled, said Janet Levoff, another resident. It's possible to take this down, so it just doesn't make sense. New York City Law Department told Pix 11 News, as a result of our lawsuit, much-needed public safety repairs are ongoing at 11 of Mr. Weinreb's worst buildings. We are closely monitoring the owner's progress and expect work on the facade at 51 West 86th Street to begin in short order. But tenants will believe it when they see it. It would be a miracle, but there are miracles on 34th Street and even on 86th Street, said David Rosen, a building tenant. On August 17th, the city issued a permit to a contractor to start facade repairs on West 86th Street. Jack Weinreb, the landlord, did not return calls from Pix 11 News. So yeah, the landlord got more permits. Now, landlord already had permits to fix this multiple times over the last 16 years, okay? So it doesn't surprise me that they applied for another permit because, it makes it look like he's actually going to do something, right? And I honestly can't blame the guy, okay? He's playing as much within the rules and still able to turn a profit as he can. Now, if you deregulate his building and then make it so he can charge whatever he wants for rent, then maybe he'll do the repairs. Or if he's able to remove all of the current tenants and put all new tenants in there at the current market rate, well, guess what? Now, doing the facade repairs might actually be worth it to him. But hey, they dug their own grave with all their ridiculous policies, all of their bureaucracy. And what did they expect? Okay, did they expect us to just lie down and take it? Did they expect him to just, oh yeah, I'll go and do millions of dollars worth of repairs and not be able to recover that money? I'm a moron. No. Okay, this is what's going to happen.